Hi all, thank you very much for clicking on the video. Today we're going to go through the process of replacing the right CV shaft, the front one, and so that's the driver's side in Australia. The reason why I'm replacing these is recently when I was driving in a straight line there was a slight light clicking sound which would indicate to me that the inner CV part has failed. If you're turning hard, it's often the outer that has failed. It may not always be the case, but in this instance it was clicking while I was driving very slowly in a straight line. So time to remove and replace the CV shaft that I had available to me, and I have that one here. So the CV shaft itself is pretty straightforward. The only difference you'll notice here on the Subaru SVX is it doesn't have the input shaft that comes from the gearbox. It's held in with a pin, roll pin that goes through here. To get that out, you need a punch with a flat head. It's 5mm and it will go straight through and push that out. Once that's out, then you can obviously remove the CV shaft. You will need another part, and that is a replacement nut for the axle nut. One of these, this is genuine one. You'll see there by the part number. And so once we've removed the old one, we should discard that and use a new axle nut and make sure we torque that down correctly, and I'll go through that during the video. But let's get into it. I'll show you what you need, and we'll go through the process of jacking up your car and work through it. Okay, so some of the tools that you're going to need is obviously the most important one is a replacement CV shaft. The CV shaft we'll go through pretty straightforward. You will need a torque wrench to make sure everything is buttoned up nicely. I use a little magnetic tray to keep all the fasteners that I take out. A couple of things you'll need to do is you'll need to be able to take off the under tray, protection tray. That's a 10mm. There's around about, I think there's about 7 or so nuts there. We'll go through that. You will need a 12mm to remove the ABS sensor. I use just some petrol and a good old brush, old school, to clean all the grime away, make sure that's all good. I use a paint pen just to mark one of the locations, particularly for the camber adjustment on the upright. To remove the upright items and the various, you're going to need a 17 and a 19mm. I use this little one because it's sometimes a little bit tight to get in some of those little spaces, and it's ratcheted, so it makes life a lot easier. I've got the necessary sockets as well. This one's an important one. This is a 32mm, and this is to take out the lock nut on the axle nut. You will need that. You will need a punch. Now what I've done is this one's an old one that was bent, and then I just put it on a grinder and I modified it so that I can, with the axle nut, where it's bent in, I can get underneath that and then knock that out so that I can undo it easier. So that's just a little trick. I have a couple of these. These are for the threads to be able to pull off the brake caliper, so the rotor rather, and it just makes it easier to just pull it off. There's my pin. I use one cable tie to hold up the brake, and then just various sort of tools. Now one of the ones that you need is to be able to have a ball joint remover. This helps in removing the steering rack ball joint. I don't remove the bottom one, but I do mark the parts, and you'll see how I go through this. And a nice little block of timber just to knock things that you don't want to bend. It's just softer on the metal. So apart from that, it's pretty straightforward. So now the process is to remove the under tray. So there's two either side over here. These are 10mm. Loosen them off first. I don't like to use power tools on an old car. Over time they tend to threads get a little bit worn, and it's easier to damage the threads, and hence the reason why I like to make sure that everything is easily taken out. So I'll do a lot of this with hand tools rather than power tools. It's an older idea, but it seems to allow me to have my gear last longer. Right, so with the under tray removed, we now have a bit of a view of the underside of the vehicle. So as you can see, my vehicle's now due for another service. I'm going to do that after this as well. So a year ago, or just over a year ago, I did the last service at 165,000 kilometers. It's now done almost 167, so just under 2,000 kilometers for the year. You'll notice a few modifications. I've got strong flex bushings rather than the originals. They're a little bit harder to come by, but as you can see underneath the vehicle, it's pretty tidy. The part of concern that we're looking at today is the CV shaft, which you can sort of see coming out just there next to the steering rack and then into the upright. So what we're going to do is we're just going to clean that all up, make sure it's all nice and tidy. Overall, you can see the one that I got on this side looks nice and tidy, and right in there to the ABS sensor. So what I'll do is, if you have a look on that side, the ABS sensor is nice and clean, whereas on this side it just needs a bit of a clean up and a tidy up as well. So that's part of the process, what we'll do today. I like to clean everything as I go, but I won't spare you the challenge of watching me clean gear. Alright, so what we're going to do is we're going to use the service manual as a bit of a guide. I don't follow the guide exactly. I probably should. I'm not a mechanic, but the guide states that in section 4.2, removing and installing the drive shaft, put the selector in neutral in the vehicle, release the car, what everyone now calls an e-brake, I call it just a handbrake, lift up your vehicle and inspect, remove the hubcap, unlock the axle nut, and then depress the brake pedal to stop the drive shaft from rotating, and then go through the process of removing the stabilizer link, disconnect the ABS harness from the strut, disconnect the brake hose clamp from the strut, and then place alignment marks using the paint pen on those to make sure you've got the right place. Loosen the stabilizer clamp, disconnect the lower control arm from the housing. So just that's the lower arm from the housing, that's the ball joint, and then protect the ball joint using a cloth and to prevent damage. Remove the spring pin, which is that pin inside the axle that's next to the gearbox, and then basically remove the shaft from the housing. So I'm going to do it slightly differently, and I'll go through that very shortly. Okay, before you jack up your car, a little good technique is to actually loosen off these wheel nuts. They are 19mm, and I just loosen them off because they should be torqued to around about 100 Newton meters. So it's nice to be able to just loose them off, and then we'll jack up the car. We can then take the wheel off. If you can get this out, which I can, I'm a bit surprised, Then what we'll do is we'll remove this cap here, and then we can access the wheel nut. I generally will put it back on the ground so that it stops it from spinning, and it gives it an easier method to remove the axle nut. Let's do that. Now that I've loosened the wheel nuts, I'm quite happy to use an impact just to take those off. I always take them off opposite. And that way they're less likely to just simply damage. So, right, put that out of the way. Now what we're going to do is we're going to get a small screwdriver and start to loosen this so that we can pull this cap off. So I'm just using a very small screwdriver, and I'm just going to make my way around and just do little tiny taps to slowly bring the cap out rather than try and force it out in one big go, because unfortunately I don't have another one of these. Now it's starting to pop out, and just slowly work it open. And eventually it'll just come off. That should be enough to just lever it off. Not quite. Now don't rush this, just take your time. Here it comes. So just levering it off just ever so gently, and that's it. So this way I've minimized the damage on this edge, and you can see it actually does have a rubber seal on there that's just about gone. So we will need to find a replacement to that. So what we're going to do is we're going to remove this axle nut, but see how it's been compressed in, and this is why you need a replacement one. This is my little tool that I made, and we're just trying to lift that bent piece back up. And that way, to get it undone, it'll be much easier and doesn't damage the axle or the axle nut. So now that's enough. What I'll do is I'll put the wheel back on, so that gives me a force to stop it from rotating. Now, one of the things about the Subaru ones, the SVX, is that it has this little groove that it needs to sort of fall into. And I just do the bottom one first just to line it up. I don't push it in all the way. And then these ones should go in nice and straight. You don't have to do these up too tight, just enough to keep it in place. So I'll drop the vehicle down. Now I'll put the 32mm axle nut on here. And there we go. It's that easy. So making sure, in this case, don't take it all the way off, just so that it sits flush. Then we can take the wheels off and start on the next process. Now that we've got it all jacked up, ready to go, some of the bolts we're going to remove the brake caliper bolts. These are two 17mm here. We've got a 12mm here for the ABS that's just sitting on that side. I'll go around so you can see a little bit better. So there's the little 12mm. There's a 19mm here. Surprised that the last person that serviced this, wasn't me, didn't put a cotter pin in there. So we'll use the remover to remove those. This is where I'm going to make the mark for the top one. So this will make sure that it gives me a fairly close alignment. I'll get the wheel alignment redone. And then up in here, where it's important, is to, if you rotate the CV shaft, you can do that with the brake caliper. So you'll see it, there it is there. That's that roll pin there that we've got to knock out with a 5mm punch. So to do that, make sure you've got the handbrake off and in neutral. So let's go through it. First, we'll start with this. Alright, to remove this one, just come in over the top. We've got it on a reasonable amount of torque and just pop it off. Now what I normally do is I just screw it down, back on. You can do it the other way if you don't want to damage the top. So that just sits like that until it goes on at that level. Right, so that's now set there. So now what we're going to do is the ball joint remover tool. So in this case, what we'll do is place this in here. So that sits there, nice and snug. This is actually 22mm, this one. I'm going to tighten it up and it should pop. There it is. And I keep that nut on so that it doesn't fly down and hit my arm on the way through. So let's just loosen that off. Then it doesn't fire off across the ground. We'll take that off again. There it is. Easy. That's how it's done without making a mess of everything. Now, there's no advertising, paid revenue or anything here. This is just something that I use a lot. These are multi-purpose wipes. They're a fantastic item. I came across these from one of my local stores, and it's fantastic for cleaning away any sort of grime where you're working. So it's just ideal. You'll see how quickly it just pulls away grime where you're working. So I use these a lot for both cleaning parts as I go, and also obviously cleaning my hands. So it's just a handy thing to have in your toolkit, and I'll use this extensively. But I also use just classic petrol and a little nylon brush just to clean around these areas as I go, and then that way this is all nice and clean as I progress. So the next shot you'll see me doing is I'll clean all this up, and then you'll see it nice and clean. Okay, this is nice and clean now. what we're going to do is remove the ABS sensor and make sure that that's all nice and clean. Make sure that there's no potential interference in there that will impact the sensor. So that's just a 12mm that comes out. Now when you're taking this out, there's a small metal gasket. So just gently there it is. And there's all the sort of rust that we need to sort of just clean away. And there's that tiny little metal space that you don't want to damage. So I'll clean that up and we'll take it from there. All right, the next thing we're going to do is remove the brake calipers. These are 17mm. Right, so it needs a little bit of extra. So now what we'll do is we'll take those off. And they're loose. I'll be able to take that one and got all that. Right, before I take that one off, I'm just going to grab a cable tie so I can then mount the brake caliper up here. So what I'll do is I'll just have the cable tie ready. Take this one off. This should just move off like yay. Of course, she's not going to plan. It would be easier if I just had a hanger. Oh, finally. Right, that is out of the way. Now, to take these off, rotors, holes here. So what you can do is you can screw these in. If it's a little bit challenging to get off. These are 13, but I think this is going to come straight off. So if you can't get that off, you can use those to push it off. Right, so now we have the rotor off, we have the brake caliper secured away. Might just make it a bit higher. And it's free. And then what I'll do is I'll loosen these off, but before I do that, I'm going to mark it with a paint pen. So you'll see up in here, I'll mark the top one with a paint pen. Now that it's clean, that's the easiest way. So now I'll let that dry, and then I'll remove those. Okay, while that's drying, what I'm going to do is remove this pin. It's a 5mm punch with a flat end. When it's almost out, you can rotate a little bit so you can get a better angle, and then it should come out and there it is. So this is the pin here. It's got these little teeth. As it gets pushed in, they compress together and that holds it in place. So that's all we need to do, and that's ready to go. All right, these are 19mm. What we need to do is try and turn the nut rather than the actual fastener. So that's nice and tight. There we go, cracks. So that was definitely torqued up right. But we want to try and keep the one on this side in the right position so that we don't change the camber too much. And then take these out. And then what we'll do is take this out here. I'm hoping, yep, that will push through. And just carefully rest it there. Then what we'll do is just simply, it'll come straight out. Comes out through that little gap. And then through. Okay, here's a like-for-like comparison. A genuine versus non-genuine. The first thing you'll notice is there's this lip on the end versus the non-genuine, and also on the genuine there's this little raised piece just here. There's nothing there, so the other end looks fairly similar, but yeah, there is a difference between the two. Slight length difference, ever so slightly, between them, but good chance that this will be our best thing to put back in there. So happy with that. Okay, what we're going to do is the reverse of what we did before. I'm going to put the shaft in. The crucial part is making sure that this here lines up with the hole in the male part of the shaft to the female. So we're going to just basically feed this through as per the reverse of the last one. This is one of the reasons why they suggest you take the So now that that's through, line it up with the, I'm hoping that's the spot. So a little test is use your pin and it should be able to go through. And in this case it didn't. Okay, so what we're trying to do is make sure that this here lines up so that you can pass the pin all the way through. And by rights, the 5mm should be able to go all the way through as well, because it doesn't. So just make sure you, because they're fine teeth, that it lines up. Okay, with a little bit of mucking about, it turns out that at some point the input shaft that's been placed in here has been a non-genuine one, and as a result this pin here did not line up through this part here. So what I've done is I've found another CV shaft that I had, which is brand new, non-genuine, but it fits the input shaft. So what I'm going to do now is push that one in and knock it in place. So it's pretty straightforward. Line it up, get it started. So just pushing it all the way in until it sits flat, and then check the other side. We can rotate that possibly. And maybe a fraction more out the other way. Voila. So now we work on the upright assembly. So what I'm going to do is just simply pivot this up, push this down. It's a little bit of a fiddle. Once it's over the spline, you want to get that into the upright, into the strut. Now I like to put on the nut just to stop it from falling out, damaging the bearing. So here we're pushing this into place. Oh, that's it. Top one. Right, that's that locked in. Then we're placing the camber bolt so it lines back up with that paint mark. And then we do those up relatively tightly, but not too tight, because when we put the weight of the wheel on it, then we'll get it right. So now what we're going to do is just button these up a bit. Make sure that they lock in place, but the most important thing is I don't want to rotate this bolt here other than so that it remains in line with that. bottom one's not so bad. There's no camber adjustment on the bottom one, so they're just tight but not torqued. So before we put the brake rotor on and the brake calipers, while we've got plenty of space, we'll put the castle nut on the steering. So that's a 19. I like to use a little bit of an impact because it's on a ball joint, so it is likely to spin. And then what we're trying to do is line up to put a split pin in there. There wasn't one in there before. All right, rotor time, and then brake caliper. All right, so putting on the rotor, this part is important to try and get it so it's set at the right area. What I normally do is I'll actually put these on so that it's largely in the right place. And then while that's there, I can then just tighten the so that's bringing it fairly tight. Give it a couple of tacks. That's not obviously at torque. Now hang this. Make sure the brake pads are sitting correctly and over the line up one at the base. Once one's in, then we can do the other one. So we just need to line up this one up in here. So that's in. And then we can tighten those up. Okay, so the last part of the puzzle is putting back the ABS sensor. So don't forget to put the spacer on. And then that'll just tighten up. So this is just that 12mm. And I'll torque it up a little bit later. We'll check the So now we're largely done. We can put the wheels on, we can lower the vehicle and tighten up the axle nut. Alright, we're going to tighten up the axle nut. The axle nut is needs a torque between 167 and 206 Newton meters, or 123 to 152 foot-pounds. In kilograms, 17 to 21. So fair bit of torque, so make sure you've got a torque wrench that'll be able to cater for that. Try and feed these on first using your finger so you don't run the risk of cross-threading them. Right, now we can put this on the ground, put it in park, put it in gear, and then tighten that axle nut up to between 167 and 206 Newton meters. I got to around about 170. Set the torque wrench. So Newton meters between 167 and 206, so I'm going to go 170. Here we go. So that's 170. And then what we need to do is knock in this axle nut corner here so that it's set. Now what I normally do is actually take the load off the vehicle, lift it in the air, and then I put it back down. And the reason for that is it'll shift the angle of the tire a little bit, and that's just to double check. Yep, perfect. Okay, now that it's all torqued up, what we want to do is knock in this part of the axle nut so that it stops it from slipping. Just do it slowly and methodically. Don't want to damage the area. And as you can see here, that's pushed that in just enough to catch either end to stop it from coming out. So now what we're going to do is put this inner cap back on. And I normally just put just a little bit of white lithium grease just for the next time to make it easy to get off. And I use a little bit of timber to knock that in. So that's that done. The last part is make sure these are torqued to 100, and then I'll go around and make sure all the other fasteners are all also torqued up, and I'll go through those very shortly. So that's it largely, and thank you very much. We'll just finish off with torquing everything up. Okay, now that it's all connected up, I've gone around and torqued all the items. So this ABS is 23 to 42 Newton meters of torque. This one here is to line up with the hole and then put a pin in it. These here are 68 to 88. So it's this one up here and this one here, Newton meters of torque. So as you can sort of see, it's all nice and tidy and nice and clean in there. The pins are all locked in and there's no leaks. By not taking out that stub, it makes it a lot easier, and my alignment should be pretty close to being original, but obviously with the service I'll get a wheel alignment done as well. So the last part is to put the engine cover, the guard, just on. So I'm pretty happy with that, but before I do that, I'll give it a service. Alright, during the video you would have noticed I had some difficulties with trying to get the pin in here, and it turned out that the one that I took out, which is that one there, it has a slightly larger hole. Whether that was drilled out, I'm not too sure, but it didn't marry up. So what I did is, these are the new ones that I got, which I thought were wrong, but it turns out they're actually right. So I was incorrect in my assumption. So I took out this pin here, took the male part of the sub-axle out, and then fitted it up, and it fit really nicely. So I've got, obviously this one is a spare now. This one is obviously someone's put this one as a previous owner, and I don't think it's quite right, and hence the reason why you can sort of see here it failed on the inner, and it's a bit of a shame, but no crisis today. All averted, everything is all done.